Welcome to Paul Smith College. Today we're going to learn how to build some shelters in the snow. Let's go. Today we're here with Nate Sabula. What are you showing us today?
So today I'm going to be showing you guys how to build a shelter in the middle of winter. So if you guys will follow me, I will show you how to build it. So I call this the time format where you have a main spar pole going down the middle. Then you would have spar poles going left to right. Normally you would want one on bottom, one on top, one on bottom, one on top to get a very fine layer, but I wanted to conserve tree usage, so I only used one tree, and so this is just a prototype of what a tent shelter would look like. Normally in summer is when I would make this type of shelter. I would have a pine bed inside, which Mr. Cameraman, if you can come closer, I'll show you. So I'm using wood chunks as a mock form of a pine bed, but I would have a pine bed inside which insulates heat and all, but in winter I was unable to find pine branches to use, so this is what I would use. So moving on to the upper layer, it is thinner branches of the tree, where I would layer it to insulate heat that way also. As I said earlier, I was limited in the amount of tree usage, so I was unable to get more pine branches, or I would have made a finer build moving from longer branches upwards. And normally what I would do to have a proper format is I would take this, start over, then work my way underneath to this one. Then if it was still longer, I would try and weave it through all the spar poles, because that's one way you can tighten it and keep it intact. So after I would have it weaved, I would then take something like this, and I would layer the top on top of that, just give it a bit more insulation. And if you'll follow me, I can show you what I would use for the roofing. So this is birch bark, which is very fine, perfect for roofing because it's good for large sheets. As you can see, if you come closer, you can see that curls, which is perfect for just placing on top. So looking upwards, it naturally curls. So I would if this was a dead tree, I would take my knife and I would tap around this, making a spiral formation in order to get a proper make a proper size to start making a roofing format. So there are also other types of survival huts, which I will go more in-depth detail on. So
We're back with Nate to show us a deeper look into the shelters in winter he couldn't when we were outside.
alright, thank you, Nick. So as you can see, the first shelter we have on the screen is a teepee. The picture was taken in summer, but you can make this shelter in winter. So what you want to do is outside, depending on if it's winter, summer, spring, or fall, You're going to want to try and find as straight tree as possible and start lining your tree in spar poles. But what I normally do for my TP is I take 4 of the straightest spar poles as I can, and I put them in the cardinal directions of north, south, east, and west. And then I'll start laying more spar poles in between the 4 of them, but have a entrance so I can go in and out of the teepee. For afterwards, I would go inside and layer the inside with a pine bed before I work on the outside so I can have the inside set up. After the pine bed's set in, I will then put a fine layer of pine needles on the outside to keep the warmth in also, because pine needles are also a way you can make a first layer of a roof. Then I'll take either birch bark or any type of good shelter bark that I can find in the area to use as a roof. Alright, so going into shelter number 2, we have a lean-to. So what you want to do to create the structure of the lean-to before you start actually building upon it is you want 5 straight spar poles that you have on you that are straight as possible, because you're going to have 2 X formations for the left side and right side, which will be your supporting portions. And on the back side, you will take the remainder of your spar poles and start laying them down so they create a wall section. After putting down the remainder of the spar poles, you'll take pine branches and start layering them over the back of the lean-to so that you can get a insulation / roof layer, which will keep out the rain as best as possible. And normally I would take a pine bed and put it into the lean-to that way, or if I found a dead pine tree, and if it was a dead tree, I would take the pine branches and use that as bedding, because it's actually soft to sleep on. So yeah. Alright, so for our third type of shelter, we have an A-frame, which is very much similar to a lean-to. And you can make the shelter like the lean-to in all 4 seasons. So the structure of an A-frame is where you also have a center ridge pole, but as you can see in the picture itself, the spar poles they're basically not on one side, they're on opposite side of poles, so that it's sheltered on both sides instead of just one side of the shelter, creating a better thermal insulating protection. And you'll have a wider opening while the spar poles will get shorter in the back, creating a tent-like formation. For our fourth and final shelter, we have the emergency shelter, which you can take where you can dig a pit at the base of a tree and dig it out so that if you're in whiteout conditions, it can serve as a temporary shelter till the storm passes over. I personally have not used this shelter before, but I have heard that it works well. You just have to have the right gear to make the shelter.
Thank you, Nate, for being here today.
Thank you, Nick, for having me on the show. I greatly enjoyed being on here, and I hope I can be on here in the future.
Yes, I hope to see you back here. Have a nice day.
Thank you, Nick. You too.